The BBU configuration process nobody explains properly. What a live BBU configuration taught me. Step 1. Site readiness. Hello, great minds. Today I tell you a story of what a live BBU configuration taught me. I remember the afternoon I pulled up to that site with my colleague like it was yesterday. The sun was almost setting, but we had to rush in and save the day. The air was cooling down. I stepped out of the vehicle, looked at the telecom equipment room ahead of me, the very tall tower painted in red and white, and felt something settle inside my chest. Not nerves, not excitement, just focus. I had been working in telecoms for a few years by then. I had studied the diagrams. I had read the manuals. I had watched senior engineers move through sites with quiet confidence and told myself I would carry that same energy one day. That day had arrived, but I knew from the field that no two sites are the same. A drawing on paper and a live installation in front of you are two completely different things. The diagram might show you a neat, labeled cabinet. The reality might show you cables running at angles you did not expect, boards slotted in slightly different positions, and a room that smells of metal and cooling air and years of equipment doing its job in silence. You cannot prepare for that with a textbook alone. You prepare for it with discipline. So before I touched anything, I did what every field engineer worth their tools does first. I assessed the environment completely. I walked the room slowly, the way a surgeon walks into an operating room before a procedure. Not casual, not rushed. Deliberate. I checked the power feeds one by one, tracing each cable back to its source, confirming that the power was stable and correctly distributed across the cabinet. Then I checked the grounding. Grounding is one of those things that nobody talks about until it causes a problem. A poorly grounded cabinet can introduce interference that corrupts signals, damages sensitive boards, and creates faults that are incredibly difficult to trace after the fact. Clean grounding means the site breathes properly. After power and grounding, I moved to the transmission lines. These are the physical connections that carry data between the equipment inside the cabinet and the wider network. I confirmed that every transmission path was correctly routed, that the connectors were seated properly, and that nothing had been left loose or unlabeled. Loose connections in telecom sites are quiet disasters waiting to happen. I also spoke with the installation team who had prepared the physical setup before my arrival. These conversations matter. The installation team sees things during physical work that do not always make it into a report. A board that were harder than expected to slot in. A cable that needed extra length. A label that was replaced because the original was damaged. Knowing these details before you configure gives you a fuller picture of the site you are working on. We aligned on the full cabinet layout. We confirmed which slots were populated and live, which were empty, and which were reserved for future expansion. We made sure every connection point matched the documentation I had studied the night before in my hotel room, because I always review the site plan the night before. Always. By the time I finished my walkthrough, I had a complete mental picture of the environment. Power stable. Grounding clean. Transmission confirmed. Cabinet layout verified. Nothing was left to assumption. I pulled out my notepad, worked through my checklist item by item, and ticked each one off with the quiet satisfaction of someone who respects the process. This step, the readiness check, is something junior engineers often rush through. They want to get to the exciting part. I understood that feeling. I had felt it myself early in my career. But I had also learned, more than once, that the exciting part only goes well when the foundation is right. Some engineers arrive on site and treat the readiness check like a formality, a box to tick before the real work begins. I had learned to treat it like the real work itself, because a site that is not truly ready does not forgive you for moving forward anyway. It just waits and shows you its problem at the worst possible moment. The site was ready. So was I. Step 2, hardware identification. The cabinet was a solid unit, the kind you find at major telecom base stations across the country. Inside it, a set of boards were slotted into their bays, each one performing a specific function, each one carrying small but critical labels that told you exactly what it was, where it lived, and what it connected to. To an untrained eye, it looks like a wall of identical metal. To a field engineer, every board tells a story. My job at this stage was to locate the BBU, the baseband unit. To understand why the BBU matters, you need to understand what happens when a mobile call is made or data is sent from a phone. Your phone communicates with the nearest mobile network tower through radio signals sent and received by antennas. Those signals travel down into the base station equipment, where they need to be processed, interpreted, managed, and sent onward to the core of the network. The BBU is a unit that does all of that processing. It is the intelligence of the site. Without it, the antennas are just metal poles standing in the wind. A BBU manages the interface between the radio units and the transmission network. It handles signal processing, resource allocation, and communication protocols. In a modern network, it may be handling thousands of simultaneous connections, managing bandwidth, and coordinating with a core network, all in real time, all in a box no bigger than a few rack units in a cabinet. It is a remarkable piece of engineering. I moved my eyes carefully and slowly across the cabinet face. I was not in a rush, and I want to be very clear about why. In telecom hardware work, speed is not a virtue at this stage. Precision is. Rushing during hardware identification is how engineers make mistakes that take hours to correct. You reach for the wrong board. You disconnect a cable that was feeding something active. You create a fault in a system that was working fine, and then you spend the rest of the day chasing a problem you caused yourself. I identified the BBU by its slot position, confirmed by cross-referencing the board's physical label against the site documentation I carried. I checked the slot numbers above and below it to confirm the surrounding hardware was correctly populated and that nothing nearby was unexpectedly active or in an alarm state. I also checked the faceplate indicators, the small LED lights on each board, reading their colors and patterns the way a doctor reads a patient's vital signs. Everything matched. The board was in the correct position. The labels were consistent. The LED indicators showed normal status. I photographed the cabinet layout from two angles, a wide shot showing the full cabinet and a close shot showing the BBU board and its immediate neighbors. Documentation at this stage is not bureaucracy. It is professional discipline. If a question arises later about what the cabinet looked like before configuration began, those photographs are your evidence and your protection. Hardware confirmed. I was ready to access the system. Step 3. Local access setup. This is the step where the work stops being physical and becomes digital. It is also the step where I have seen engineers lose their confidence, because if the access setup is not done correctly, nothing responds. You are left staring at a browser that will not load, wondering what you missed. I had been in that position early in my career, once, and I had used the experience to make sure I never ended up there again. The BBU, like most network equipment, has a local maintenance interface. This is a dedicated connection point that allows an engineer to access and configure the unit directly without needing to go through the main network management system. It exists precisely for situations like this one, where the site is being commissioned for the first time and has not yet been integrated into the wider network. I started by locating the USB port on the BBU, just to orient myself to the physical interface layout. The USB port can be used in certain management scenarios, but for this configuration I will be working over Ethernet. I reached into my kit bag and pulled out my Ethernet adapter, connected it to my laptop's USB-C port, and ran the cable to the BBU's local Ethernet maintenance port. The connection was direct, physical, and unambiguous. Now came the part that requires the most attention. The BBU communicates on a specific local IP address, a fixed address that is set by the manufacturer and documented in the equipment specifications. For my laptop to talk to the BBU, it needed to be on the same IP network. This means I had to manually configure my laptop's network adapter to use an IP address in the same subnet as a BBU, with a matching subnet mask and no gateway needed since we were communicating directly. I went into my laptop's network settings, found the Ethernet adapter, and adjusted the IP configuration manually. I set the IP address, confirmed the subnet mask matched the BBU's network, and left the default gateway blank. The whole process took about 2 minutes. But those 2 minutes are the hinge on which everything else swings. Get them wrong and nothing works. Get them right and the door opens. I saved the settings, opened my browser, typed the BBU's local IP address into the address bar, and pressed enter. The login page loaded cleanly. There is a moment of quiet when that page appears that I have never quite been able to put into words. It is not excitement, exactly. It is more like confirmation. The machine and the engineer are now in the same room, speaking the same language, ready to work together. Every step before this one was preparation. This was the beginning of the real work. I entered the credentials, logged in, and took a moment to look at the interface before I started anything. Good engineers do not rush into a live system. They look first. They understand the layout. They confirm they are where they think they are before they start issuing commands that change things. I was ready. The configuration phase could begin. Step 4. Configuration phase. The local server interface of the BBU was clean and well-structured. I had reviewed screenshots of it before arriving on site, which meant I was not spending time orienting myself now. I knew where everything was. I knew what I was looking for, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. The configuration of a BBU during site commissioning covers several areas. You are defining the site's identity on the network. You are setting the parameters that tell the system how to manage its radio resources. You are aligning the unit with the transmission network it will use to carry data. And you are doing all of this through precise commands that leave no room for approximation. The language used to issue these commands is called MML, Man-Machine Language. It is a command format used across a wide range of telecom equipment, particularly in systems built by major vendors. Each MML command follows a strict syntax. You specify the command type, the parameters, and the values. The system reads a command, validates it, and either executes it and returns a success response, or rejects it and tells you why. Working in MML on a live system is one of the clearest tests of a field engineer's knowledge. You cannot rely on a graphical interface to hold your hand. You have to know what each command does, what parameters it requires, and what response to expect. If you are guessing, the system will show you up immediately. I began with the foundational configuration commands, setting the site identity, the board parameters, and the basic operating mode of the BBU. Each command came back clean. Success, success, success. I moved into the transmission configuration next, setting parameters that would define how the BBU connects to the network once the physical Ethernet link to the RTN was in place. Then I worked through the radio resource management settings, confirming that the unit would handle connections in the way the network plan required. After each significant command, I captured a screenshot. This is a habit I built early and have never dropped. Screenshots during configuration serve multiple purposes. They are your record of what was done and when. They are your evidence during any post-commissioning review. And they are your safety net if something needs to be rolled back or revisited. An engineer who configures a live system without documenting the steps is an engineer who is one question away from being unable to explain what they did. I worked through the full command sequence without rushing. At each stage, I checked the response, confirmed it matched what I expected, and moved to the next command only when I was satisfied. This is not slowness. This is a discipline that separates a commissioning engineer who rarely has problems from one who spends half their time correcting their own work. By the time I reached the final configuration command, the BBU was fully set up, every parameter was aligned with the network plan, every response had been clean. The screenshots filled a dedicated folder on my laptop, clearly named and time-stamped. I reviewed the configuration one final time from the top, comparing each setting against my reference document. Everything matched. I closed the command interface, sat back, and allowed myself a single moment of satisfaction before moving to the final stage. Step 5, transmission integration and O&M verification. This was the step I had been building toward from the moment I walked through the door that morning. Everything before this was preparation and setup. This was integration. This was the moment the BBU would stop being configured but isolated unit and become a working part of a real mobile network. I picked up the Ethernet cable I had set aside earlier and connected the BBU to the RTN. The radio transmission node is the equipment responsible for carrying the site's traffic over microwave or fiber links back to the core of the mobile network. It is the bridge between the base station and everything beyond it. Without the RTN connection, the BBU can process signals perfectly but has nowhere to send them. The site would work locally and fail globally. The cable seated cleanly into the port. I checked both ends, confirmed they were fully engaged, and looked at the indicator lights on the BBU's transmission interface. The link light came on. Green. Solid. Transmission was live. I took a breath and let that register. The physical layer was connected. The logical layer had already been configured. The site was speaking to the network. But I was not done. In professional telecom commissioning, a site is not complete until it is visible and manageable from the central network management system. This final step is called O&M verification, operations and management. It is the confirmation that the network's brain can see the site, communicate with it, and manage it remotely. I opened iMaster on my laptop. iMaster is Huawei's network management platform, a system used by operators and engineers to monitor, configure, and manage network elements across an entire mobile network from a central location. It gives engineers and operations teams visibility into every active site, every board, every transmission link. I navigated to the topology view and began the process of creating the new site entry. I entered the site name, the site type, and most importantly, the operations and management IP address. This is the IP address I had configured on the BBU during the command phase, the address that the management system would use to reach out across the network and establish contact with the unit. I submitted the entry and waited. In telecom work, these few seconds of waiting after a final verification step carry a particular kind of weight. You have done everything correctly, or at least you believe you have. Now the system is about to tell you whether you were right. The network does not care about your confidence. It only cares about the truth of what you configured. The site appeared in the topology view. I looked at that screen for a moment longer than necessary, not because I was surprised. I had done the work correctly, and I knew it, but because seeing it confirmed, watching the site appear in the management system as a real, recognized, managed node in the network made the whole morning real in a way that nothing else could. I created the formal O&M entry, captured the final screenshots, and added them to my documentation folder. I reviewed my full record for the day, from the site readiness checklist all the way through to the topology confirmation, and confirmed that every step was documented, every decision was recorded, and every result was captured. Then I closed my laptop, packed my kit, and walked out of that equipment room. I had arrived that morning knowing this process on paper. I left it knowing it in my hands, in my decisions, in my instincts. That is a different kind of knowledge entirely. It does not live in a manual. It lives in you. I had walked in as an engineer with preparation. I walked out as an engineer with experience. And in this field, those are not the same thing. Not even close. Field work teaches precision, coordination, and structured execution. Theory meets reality, and reality wins every time. I know it on a picture is not I know it in front of you. Thank you for your time, and do check out more videos like this here. If you have something in mind you want us to make, comment below and we will give it a shot. If you like this video, subscribe to this channel today. See you around.